This prison is more than just walls, it's a fortress, a maximum security facility equipped with the most advanced surveillance systems in America. Cameras capture every move, lights never go out, and no prisoner has ever dared to escape. But all of that is about to change when a prisoner learns that he's going to be a father. Desperation fuels his determination. He knows there's only one option: escape or die trying. Will he outsmart the unbreakable system, or will his dream of freedom crumble before his eyes? What follows is a daring prison escape filled with twists, betrayals, and unexpected turns. Stay tuned for the full story. Alton City Jail. At first glance, it could pass for a middle school tucked away in a quiet American suburb. But inside, the reality was far different. Built in 2002, this maximum security facility in Mad County, Illinois, was one of the most secure prisons ever constructed. Cameras covered every corner of the prison, from the hallways to the 9x12 cells, where inmates spent 23 hours a day locked away. Each cell had its own camera, leaving no place to hide. The lights never turned off. The guards checked on inmates every 30 minutes, and no one had ever dared to attempt an escape. But Quante Adams wasn't like other prisoners. Since he was 12, gang culture in Compton, California had already shaped his life. As a black man growing up in a world dominated by Crips and drug dealers, Quante saw his path in the streets. His only role models were the ones making money on the corner, and by 2004, he was hoping a $1, $4 million marijuana deal would change everything. But the FBI had other plans. An undercover sting operation led to his arrest, and he was sentenced to 35 years. It seemed like Quan's fate was sealed. But that was the thing about Quante Adams, he never played by the rules of fate. From the moment he arrived at Alton, Quan's mind was already working. He wasn't just an inmate, he was a strategist, always observing, always thinking. As he sat in his cell, he realized that his motivation for escaping went beyond his own survival. It was about his unborn child, the baby he had learned about on the night of his arrest. He wanted to break the cycle of gang life, to give his child a future that didn't involve jail cells and locked doors. And in Alton, as the cameras watched his every move, Quante began his careful observation of every detail around him: the layout, the guards, and the steel walls that surrounded him. Alton Jail was a fortress. No one had ever attempted an escape, and no one thought it was possible. The prison's state-of-the-art security system kept everyone in line. But Quante wasn't just anyone. One night, while lying in his cell, he caught the scent of rain drifting through the exhaust vent. That small breeze told him everything he needed to know. The vent led outside, and if he could find a way to reach it, he might just make it out of this fortress alive. But the problem was that the vent was up in the ceiling, and the walls were fortified with steel. The cameras left no room for error, as they captured all angles not only in the room but throughout the entire prison. Still, Quante had one advantage. He noticed a 12-inch blind spot just behind the camera in his cell. It wasn't much, but it was enough. From this tiny area, Quante started planning his escape. First, he realized that he would need a hacksaw blade to cut through the steel ceiling, but tools like that didn't exist in Alton. So he came up with a plan. He sent a coded message to his cousin, hidden behind a postage stamp, asking for the blade to be smuggled inside a hardback book. The book was delivered to another inmate, who passed it to Quante. Hidden inside the book's cover was the tool that would be the key to his freedom. But nothing at Alton was simple. Packages arriving at the prison were scanned using the latest technology. Any sign of tampering would set off alarms, and if the book was detected, Quante's plan would fall apart. He watched from his cell as the guards handed the book to the inmate. He held his breath, hoping that everything had gone unnoticed. Fortunately, the book was not examined, and the blade had made it in. With the hacksaw blade in his possession, Quante Adams knew that his bid for freedom had officially begun. But in Alton City Jail, where security was airtight and bed checks happened every 30 minutes, time was not on his side. Quante needed more than just a tool. He needed a strategy. He'd have to use the prison's own high-tech security system against itself. So, knowing that every door was secured by loud buzzing alarms, Quante learned to listen. He memorized the footsteps of each guard, the length of their stride, the rhythm of their patrols. The buzzing doors gave him an early warning system. But he needed more. Night after night, he scraped at the stainless steel ceiling, removing a fraction of an inch at a time, always alert to the sounds around him. 60 seconds of sawing, then pacing for another 30 seconds, then pausing. It was a game of patience and nerves. Weeks passed, and Quante's plan was taking shape. But as the cracks in the ceiling grew larger, they became easier to spot. He had to improvise. With bars of soap and clear toothpaste, he became a chemist, carefully mixing the spackling paste that matched the color of the ceiling to conceal the damage. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he faced inspection as the guards entered his cell for bed checks. The cut in the ceiling, just inches from discovery, turned every moment into a terrifying game of hide and seek. 6 weeks after smuggling in the hacksaw, Quante had nearly completed his escape. He cut an oval in the ceiling the size of a basketball, just big enough to crawl through. It was the moment he had dreamed about, the moment he had visualized every day since arriving at Alton. But as he made the final cut, he faced a new problem. The ceiling plate wasn't held in place. He couldn't just put it back, it would fall through if anyone touched it. As he tried to slide it aside, he heard the dreaded sound, the buzzer. bed check. And the guard he feared the most, Mike Morelli, was heading straight for his cell. Morelli was the toughest guard in the prison, known for catching even the smallest slip-ups. If Quante was caught now, his dream of escape would vanish forever. He quickly maneuvered the ceiling plate into place and ran to the door to block the guard's view. The second buzzer sounded, he could hear Morelli's heavy footsteps approaching, seconds away from a confrontation that would seal his fate. The plan was going smoothly until disaster struck. As he attempted to put the ceiling plate back into place, it slipped. And just as the plate fell, the guard he feared most, Mike Morelli, arrived for his second bed check. Face to face with his nemesis, Quante stood in front of the cell window, his heart racing. "What was that noise?" Morelli asked. Quick on his feet, Quante replied, "I'm just working out," trying to mask the tension in his voice. For a moment, Morelli stared suspiciously. The silence stretched on, the weight of the moment crushing down on Quante. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Morelli walked off. He was spared. But the relief was short-lived. Quante now had a new problem, the ceiling plate. It couldn't be placed back without falling again. He needed a solution. Using his jail commissary, Quante ordered peppermint candies and soaked them in water for days until they became gooey and sticky. He lined the edges of the ceiling plate with the candy mixture, forming a makeshift adhesive that, when dried, held the plate firmly in place. His plan was back on track. But the true test was still to come. Now, with the ceiling secure, it was time for the moment of truth. Quante disappeared into the blind spot of his cell's camera and hoisted himself into the hole. But when he lifted his head into the crawl space, his heart sank. It was pitch black, and he was boxed in. His weeks of sawing had led him into a dead end. But Quante wasn't a man to give up easily. Frustration mounting, he felt around in the dark until his foot jammed against a piece of metal. Out of anger, he yanked at it, bending and twisting until it broke loose. And then, in the darkness, he started hitting the metal. These falling with each strike. Suddenly, a small beam of light pierced the void. He hit again. More debris. More light. Finally, he stuck his head through a hole. And there was the vent he'd been looking for. The faint glow of street lights outside shone through. After months of careful planning, he had found his way out. It was like discovering the Holy Grail. But then he knew he couldn't make his escape alone. He needed someone on the outside, someone who could help him from beyond the prison walls. That's when Tanya Goodwin came into the picture. Initially, she was just a pen pal, a distant connection. But as their letters turned into phone calls, something deeper began to form, a connection Quante could use. For Tanya, it started innocently. She had fallen for the man behind the bars, the soft-spoken, intelligent man who seemed trapped in circumstances.